But when you deal with these trap houses, when you deal with drugs, anytime that you give the occupant notice that we're there and we're coming in to serve a police action, either to take his drugs, take his money, arrest him on warrants, and he has weapons, you always put the police at a disadvantage because he did what he always does. He folds.
Who did he fold to?
To the political pressures. He folds every time. He got here in 2006, and every time there's an opportunity for him to stand tall and be a cop and not a politician, he folds.
She is running the show on these things. She's the puppet master of the chief of police. And as derogatory as that might sound,
it's not.
But it's true.
This lady, this council person, literally said it with her face on this .gov TV. She's like, "Oh my God, Chief, thank you so much for explaining that, because I literally had no idea what a no-knock warrant is."
The opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of our sponsors.
Blu Wolf Podcast.
This episode of the Blu Wolf Podcast is brought to you by Blue Line Professional Inspections. Check out blinspections.net for all your inspection needs, including home inspection, wood-destroying insect inspection, sewer drain inspection, and on-site water treatment inspection. Blue Line is a first responder-owned business.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Blu Wolf Podcast. I'm Willie Cantu. This is a special podcast to myself because, a couple of reasons. We're going to talk about something very, very interesting. And I'm going to talk about that subject with a good friend of mine, former classmate of mine from the SAPD Police Academy. So that means we spent the same amount of time in the force, so to speak. But our unit assignments went their separate ways. But nonetheless, we were involved, I would say, in the same group. Special operations and then investigations and things like that. And I'll get to him in a little bit and let him explain what his experience was. But today's topic is going to be on search warrant entries, the discussion of the risks, the rewards, the politics, the policy, and the law. That sounds like a lot. We're going to try to minimize a lot of what we're talking about. So we're going to touch on a few things that I want to get the point across, but I don't want to totally make this thing a long, drawn-out podcast episode. But there's going to be a lot of good information about this subject, and it is particularly on the entries related to search warrant execution. But this is David Sccepansky. David is, like I said, a classmate of mine, retired as a captain from the SAPD. After how many years did you do?
33 years.
33 years. Okay. Okay. So I tell people I did 32 on the pension and 33 with the city. I don't know why I have to say that, but I feel like I do. So did you, were you ever an acting DC?
I was an acting DC at one point in 2020, which is 2020 is that point in time that we're really going to spend a lot of time talking about. My deputy chief at the time retired. Sorry, Brown at the time. I was an acting deputy chief from May of 2020 until September of 2020 when they named a full-time deputy chief.
Okay. Tell me, if you can, in a quick way, from how long were you a patrolman, then you went to detective, how long were you there, and where you were assigned as a patrolman, because we worked together as patrol officers as well. And then your supervisor, I started as a sergeant, lieutenant, and then up to captain. Can you just give us a brief overview of that?
Yeah. So, like every patrolman, we come out on patrol. I worked a couple of different shifts. Central really is kind of where I broke out at West, briefly went to Central, went to crew. I'm back down to Central. Very early in my career, I was just very fortunate to go to a special operations unit at about 2.5 years, which, as you know, that's not always the. And I went to a unit called Park and Walk, which was kind of a
Park and Walk.
Yeah, Park and Walk, like a really cool concept at the time. I don't know, as like walking and riding, but really being at the project, right in the courts, right, low income housing. That's where we were. That's where we spent all of our time.
Let me mention something real quick about Park and Walk. Park and Walk was the safe San Antonio fear-free environment unit of the day, right? They started out as a community policing unit, was it not?
Yeah, so it started out that way because what they wanted to do is get the officers out on their walking, right? Out
Meeting citizens.
people in the lower income houses and letting them know that they were there for their needs. That was still always the objective. In my opinion, that should always be the objective of any police department. Let the law-abiding people know that you're there to help them. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we do. But it also morphed into like a reaction team. And so,
because you guys were walking up on crimes in progress, right?
Walking up, and then we got rapport with the people out there, and then they would say, hey, there's this place that's doing X, and these guys that are doing Y. And, the unit was kind of handpicked, and there was kind of a two-tier unit. One of the guys that started, one group of individuals that started a little older, a little more tenured than us. And then they brought on a bunch of younger guys, of which I was one of them. And, we were a little bit more anxious to kind of chase people down,
So it became park and run.
Yeah, so it became park and everything.
Park and everything.
Yeah, so it was there. A little time as a SWAT alternate with you. Got exposed to SWAT operations, things like that. Got promoted in 1997. Went briefly to a couple of different units.
To detective?
Yes, detective. Yeah, I'm sorry. A little time at ICE back in those days. We had to learn a little bit about the value of evidentiary collection and identification. Went to sex crimes, still one of the best jobs I ever had. I know that sounds weird, but I've always contended that'll teach you more about being a detective than any place.
Where's
department? Sex crimes.
Sex crimes. Wow.
Yeah. I imagine the homicide would probably make the same argument.
Sure.
That whole major crime section teaches you how to really understand the value of interviews, the value of statements, the value.
All the administrative stuff that you get strong at.
Right.
Yeah.
And the crimes, they're
sure. Yeah.
And so after that, went to narcotics again. The first time as a detective, spent several years there at narcotics. It was kind of home because in our special operations unit days, we were always assisting the covert units.
Yeah.
And so it kind of became a second nature thing for us.
That was kind of if you were in special operations, whether it be a SWAT alternate or SWAT, you promoted, the unit you most likely were going to go to was either going to be narcotics or rope.
Yes.
Right.
So yeah, that didn't happen for me. There was no openings. I just put myself on the list and I went to the jobs I'm talking about. When an opening did come up, I moved over to narcotics. I felt at home in narcotics. The majority of my career has been kind of in that wheelhouse, much like yours.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years there, 2003, promoted to sergeant, went to patrol for a short while, bounced around.
So how long did you spend in narcotics as a detective?
Narcotics, I was there for 3 years.
3 years. Okay. I thought it was longer.
No, because I did a couple of years with major crimes or with sex crimes.
Okay.
And then I wound up going, and I was offered the job at one point, but at that point, things were really working out for me well. In that place, we had just piloted something called the sex offender registration.
Oh.
Now is an everyday thing, but in 1998, it wasn't. And so it took a lot of effort. And then I was a sergeant for 5 years where I spent it on patrol and back in narcotics. And then I promoted to lieutenant 2009. I got an opportunity to go back to patrol and then, ultimately piloted what started out as SARIC. And then it went to the National Infuser Center at Pure. And then I had the gang unit as part of that operation and kind of had split the responsibilities, which also the gang unit took us into the world of gangs, drugs, money, and violent crime.
Always guns too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was promoted captain, was kept right in that position for a while. Moved over to East Side as commander, and then back over to Covert, where I finished out my career. With the exception of the last year, they moved me to crew for a short time, and then to the chief's office.
I remember that.
Yeah,
You were my supervisor.
I try to forget that part.
Yeah, you were my supervisor for a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends like yourself that were supervisors, and some people that I had more time on. But just by virtue of the units that I was in, I was never treated badly or like a subordinate,
Yeah.
I think I felt like the supervisors, obviously they knew my background and they trusted me with certain things. I was of no rank, no supervisor rank, so to speak. I won't even say an estimation, but did you write and execute a bunch of search warrants, whether they be, obviously it's all evidence, but I'm sure in major crimes, you probably wrote up some search warrants there for evidence related to the sex crimes, but for narcotics and weapons and arrests, do you have an estimate of how many you probably wrote?
I was talking to a friend of mine after knowing that I was going to do this with you, and it's impossible because we don't keep logs of it, but it's hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds. And I wouldn't say 10,000 because
it's hard for me to say.
It's just hundreds on hundreds on hundreds, because so many times we're running either as the entry teams or the uniform element of it. And then once we started working on narcotics as investigators, we were the ones that were securing the search warrant, which is really a probable cause statement or affidavit with cause statement. And then we would go, and then if you're preparing the warrant, I think you're the officer in charge, and then you will take care of it from there. So you're usually the one that's going to do it. And then, of course, as I moved up to sergeant, I pretty much became the warrant execution supervisor, which had different responsibilities, but we're still there running the warrants. And then as I made lieutenant, that kind of went by the wayside, and you're more of a mid-level overseer, and just making sure everything is being checked and everything is done. And then as a captain, you're again one step removed. But what we can do is give the guys that are doing it, the guys and gals that are doing it, right? What you can do is give them all the tools, the training and the support, and make sure that they get what they need in order to do their job safely and effectively. That's always the most important.
What's important, and they're in this, one of the big problems, and I won't say just the SAPD, is that when you have supervisors or administrators over certain units, a lot of them don't know the job. And that doesn't help whatsoever. Although, and we talked about this the other day, that there are some that know what they don't know, and kind of stay in their lane, so to speak, and just kind of direct. I've had, both sides and all that, but and when you were RDC and wrote, and DC, for those that don't know, it's a deputy chief. So after captain, that you've tested up to captain, then you are appointed to deputy chief.
I was the interim. Yeah, so I was holding the spot.
The interim, yeah. It was what we call acting deputy chief. But it was helpful because you knew our inner workings. You knew not to get off on a whole long story, but we did what we said was a knock and announce when it was more like a knock, and we entered in a hotel room, and you saw the body cams, and nothing happened. I mean, we got the dope, because when we knocked, the guy was opening the door, one of the suspects inside, just as we opened the door, and we could see them dealing dope, or cutting up the dope and all that. And you called us on it, and we're like, no, it was like, no, because you knew it, like, how many times did you do that yourself? It was funny. I found it funny,
but those are really, and that's where it comes in, because the job in great part is unforgiving in a lot of different ways. You do something and it has huge ramifications, right? But anytime you could take something and turn it into a learning experience, make those people that are doing it, like 25 years of experience or 2 years worth of experience, better at what they do. That's the thing that we should be doing all the time.
Sure.
And as your SWAT background, you know that everything that you do on every operation, you debrief, you guys talk there, you evaluated it, you talked about it. How could we do this better? And I don't think there was ever a time where you probably did a war or did a SWAT operation where we said, yeah, we were perfect on this.
Yes, we did. And guess what? It was on the wrong house.
Yeah. Okay, so
yes.
You're making the point, right?
It was on the wrong house. Yeah. We did the warrant, everything with the offloading, everything went down great, and it was on the wrong house.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about what came out of that, the verification officer, and we'll talk about there in a bit. Excuse me, I have allergies. But I think it's important to go over what we're going to talk about with, search warrants in particular, so people understand. I know even some of the officers may not understand exactly what gives us the authority to how it starts, to it being, compiled and written up, and then obviously taken to a judge to get signed, to get signed. And, I'm sorry, my phone went off, but, I want to talk about, so what is a search warrant? And this is according to the Criminal Code of Procedure of Texas, Chapter 18. I'll read it real quickly. Search warrant is a written order issued by a magistrate directed to a peace officer, commanding him to search for any property or thing and seize the same, and bring it before such magistrate, or commanding him to search for and photograph a child and to deliver to the magistrate any of the film exposed pursuant to the order, whether it's your sex crime deal there. No search warrant shall issue for any purpose in this state unless sufficient facts are first presented to satisfy the issuing magistrate that probable cause, and that's extremely important, does in fact exist for its issuance. A sworn affidavit setting forth substantial facts establishing probable cause shall be filed in every instance in which search warrant is requested, except as otherwise provided by this code. The affidavit becomes public information when the search warrant for which the affidavit was presented is executed, and the magistrate's clerk shall make a copy of the affidavit available for public inspection, yada, 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 all this other stuff. So that is, and we can break that down even more. We'll touch on that, so as an investigator, you are responsible for receiving information, however it may be, whether it be from an informant, and it doesn't always come from an informant. Lots of times you see, and it's kind of, let me back up. It's kind of an informant. Let's say you see a drug deal going down. You arrest that person for the narcotics they have, and they want to work that case off. So they aren't an informant, so to speak.
Yeah, they're looking for consideration.
Yeah, they're looking for consideration. And then obviously you have to corroborate the information that they've given you. Although some didn't. I was on a lot of warrants where that information was not corroborating. It was a phone call from somebody that they would call credible, and they would type up a search warrant, not even do any kind of reconnaissance on the location, and call SWAT to go hit it.
Yeah.
Right. I did a lot of those. Yeah. And those are, what'd you call them? Balls warrants?
Yeah, they're called balls warrants. I mean, they're part of a days gone by kind of way of policing. It was based, it wasn't that cut and dry. It means they didn't just like pick a number out of a hat and all of a sudden it would go on the warrant. It was a little bit more involved in that. They knew it was a dirty house. They got some information. They couldn't get somebody to get inside to see what was going on and do it. But regardless of how they did it, it's never an acceptable practice. Right? I mean, it really isn't an acceptable practice. It's cutting corners. I mean, the best way that you can do your job is to do your job correctly and professionally.
It was a flip of the coin.
It was a flip of a coin. It was like everything else back in the day. It was just one of those things that was, and no one ever really, they frowned upon it, but they didn't really frown upon it. And so, people kind of get involved in that. And then you have situations that came up in Houston where those kind of things have huge consequence. And then, of course, they come to light and they don't let me do it. I can tell you those kind of warrants haven't been executed in San Antonio, to my knowledge, in well over 15 years.
And what you're talking about, the warrant, and I'm not even sure how long ago this was, within the last 3-4 years.
The Houston situation?
Yeah, the Houston situation.
5 or 6.
5 or 6 years? Okay. Detectives received information, so they said, from someone that some individuals were dealing in narcotics, that drew up a search warrant, that made forceful entry, and ended up shooting the main suspect, his wife, and the dog. I chuckle at that, but that's because of our morbid, state of mind at this point in our, at the end of our careers. But they got burned for it, no doubt.
Yeah.
If not indicted, I didn't really keep up with that. So really a search warrant, obviously, we're talking about getting the articulable facts, corroborating the information, writing up an affidavit, showing the probable cause. We take it to a magistrate, and they determine, based on their experience and their expertise in law, that we have the right to basically circumvent the Fourth Amendment, right? The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, there that is, supported by oath or affirmation, because when you do give it to the magistrate and he decides that it is sufficient to do that, you swear to it.
Yeah.
Right. And particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons and things to be seized. Because it can't just go, hey, I want a search warrant for that house, and we want to search everything.
Yeah.
And you can't. If it's an arrest warrant for a person, I can't look in the kitchen drawers because he obviously wouldn't be hiding there.
Right.
Right.
The scope of the search.
The scope of the search. There you go. So it is a circumvention to the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, I think it's one of only, okay, someone's out there going to probably comment on this, but I think there's only 3 ways to be able to do that, is to go into someone's house, because the Fourth Amendment protects your house, right? That's with a lawful search warrant aiming. It's with permission from the occupant who has a right to give consent and then exit it.
Actually, I'm saying
Right. In other words,
which is a whole other podcast.
Right. But exit doesn't always just have to do with police action. It could be, hey, sir, officer, there's someone in there just had a heart attack.
Yeah.
Someone shooting, I heard someone screaming, crying, whatever. And so that can create exigency. Like this business is one that it's a difficult business to be. It really is. I mean, because as a patrolman, you're out there doing what the dispatcher tells you to do. But here, it's a self-driven job. You have to learn how to cultivate sources of information so that you can do your job correctly. If you don't, you'll be the happy helper. The world is full of happy helpers.
Oh, we had.
And it doesn't matter. Some guys couldn't find cocaine in Colombia, right? But they're
100%
narcotics.
Yes.
Are you kidding me? But you know what they do?
I can name names.
Yeah, well, I can't.
Yeah.
Well, I can't.
We won't.
But,
yes.
The thing about it is, they're really good at surveillance. They're really good at evidence collection, right? And so that's okay too. Not saying anybody can be great at this, but the ones that are really great at this work very hard at their craft to get really credible sources of information that help them do their job in furtherance of making this city safe. That's what this is all about.
Yeah.
It's fun about getting in there, taking the drugs, taking the drug money, getting their guns, fighting the wanted people and disrupting the organization. That's an awesome thing to do. But like we were talking off camera the other day, it's an unquantifiable job. You just will never really understand how much of a difference you make to the overall citizens of the community by taking these people and putting them in the state or the federal penitentiary for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, where they're no longer in a position to offend on the outside and make someone a victim of the crime.
Yeah.
That's an awesome thing to do.
Yeah.
But you can't quantify it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you just said, it's a valuable tool. And what we're mainly going to harp on is the fact that they've been the entry part of executing the search warrant, because you mentioned exigency, consent. Well, there's two things that are related to entries that are huge in the news now, and no-knock warrants and knock and announce warrants, right? So tell me, in your view, which we've pretty much been restricted, if not banned. I think we can finally say they've been banned.
No, I can say,
yeah, we've been,
because I was on a phone call where we were banned.
Okay, no-knock warrants are banned.
Yes,
and we're talking specifically about the San Antonio Police Department.
Yeah, and they put it in a policy, which you pointed out earlier, right? That policy was written in 2020. The conversation regarding warrants took place in August of 2020. Breonna Taylor took place in May of 2020, and the George Floyd situation took place in May of 2020. On top of that, COVID was going on, and Coral didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So that was a tumultuous year for everyone.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of noise coming out of everywhere, every city on matter of fact, not just every city in the United States. I think there was worldwide noise coming about police action, especially in regards to warrants. And we had a particular council person here for District 2 that had issued some sort of declaration or whatever they call it in order to ban a search warrant. And it was a matter of discussion.
Do you think that was just joining the Joneses?
Oh, yeah. I was just jumping on the bandwagon.
Jumping on the bandwagon. And that's San Antonio. That's San Antonio. We are never trendsetters. We follow. And they'll want to follow the national trend of something that happened thousands of miles away because, whatever hubbub they started, whether it be true or not, most of it wasn't about that situation. We're going to jump on it too, because we want to show you how compassionate we are.
But can I point out what they shared? The district person for District 2 that was making this cry, right, or this declaration, this loud verbal need to ban no-knock warrants, right? This was I was on phone calls.
And what year was that?
This was 2020.
2020.
And, because at the time I was in the interim or the active position, we had to be on a lot of budget calls, a lot of public safety calls. Anytime council was on it, and they do have that .gov television, but I don't think anybody watches it.
Yeah.
But we had to be on it in case something came up that the chief didn't readily know. And so he would call on the people that were in those positions to know. Right. And so we heard her. I heard her saying, no, we absolutely need it. My point being is that we can get to the rest of that here shortly. But my point being is that this is coming from the same council person in the same district that gets overall, by far, since the time I've been on the police department, which is the same time you've been on the police department, asked for regularly and demands the largest amount of police services in the city of San Antonio.
And what district is that?
District 2.
I know, but what side of town?
It's the east side.
The east side.
Yeah.
Which is predominantly black.
It was at one point. I don't know. It's kind of
but it was. It's always that we've known.
Yeah,
we've always, which is, we have to be honest. No one came on here to hear us be politically correct.
Well, I was the East Side Commander too, right? And I think that helped me too, because I also got an opportunity to be on a lot of boards during the Obama administration, where they were dumping a large amount of money into the East Side to regentrify, right? It was Project 7.
Still going on.
Just tons, millions and millions and millions of dollars. All the housing projects that we did when we were parking lot are no longer there. I mean, the Sut homes, the weekly homes are gone. The East Terrace homes are gone.
Well, they're the ones that we knew are gone, but I think they still call it the same.
Yeah, the real.
There's still housing projects, but they just look nicer.
I think they're called assisted living.
There you go.
Yeah.
Regardless, But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think it's important to explain to the viewers the difference between knock and announce and no knock warrants.
Sure.
Okay. And again, this applies specifically to entries, to making forceful entries. So a no knock warrant is something that we did 100% for 17 years on SWAT. We would turn away knock and announce warrants. If someone showed up and said, no, we want to do a knock and announce, it wasn't going to be a SWAT operation. We may send a few officers with them just to help, because they wanted the extra, not just the manpower, but the extra muscle to make, in case something went bad.
Yeah,
but we weren't going to make a big operation out of it like we used to on actual no knock warrants. So no knock warrants is, and here is the main thing: no knock warrants and knock and announce warrants are really nothing but tactics. They're tactical maneuvers that you use to execute the search warrant. Okay, and there's a lot of things that are involved in both of them. So, in a no knock warrant, it means that we get together as a group, say on SWAT. And because of how we know our job, we assign specific people. We send people to drive by the location covertly and inspect it and get eyes on it. And we send specific team members to be able to do that. Not everybody can do it because you might get burned.
They come about recon.
Recon, yeah. Do reconnaissance on it. And real quickly, we send the point guy, the breachers, whether they be one or two. The driver obviously needs to know the route, and possibly a team leader, just depending on how much we have.
And videotape it if you can.
Videotape it if you can. Maybe get up in the helicopter to see above. Now we can use Google Earth to see technology. Back in the day, we had the BCAD just showed the outline of the house.
Right.
No yards, no dogs, no toys to determine if there's kids or anything like that. So we do that, and then we go back to the office and we carefully plan it. We assign further personnel to certain things if we're going to use a flashbang, or so we sometimes we have to assign people to handle the dogs, as these people would have vicious dogs in our way to hinder things. But again, that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. And then we would drive up stealthily and try to use different times of the day to as a tactic as well to make sure that these people were totally caught off guard. And lots of times, especially for a lot of the dopers, was early morning hours before the sun came up.
You're pretty good. You're changing the game that it's a pretty good chance that you go catch them sleep.
Right.
Because they're up.
Yeah. And we're trying to use that as the element of surprise, number one. And obviously that they're not prepared to offer resistance where we might have to injure them or kill them, but you had to,
or one of us get in.
Or 100%.
That's absolutely.
Well, and I'm going to say this, it was mainly for us, but obviously we wanted to make sure that they did.
Yeah, their safety.
Their safety comes into play. And anybody in the surrounding, of course, sometimes there might be innocent people inside.
Yeah.
We had to worry about that as well. But, and then we would, so what I was getting at too, along with that is we'll have to damage things. We'll have to break windows, cut gates before that, pull burglar bars. Sometimes we've used rams like that from a vehicle and actually pull the burglar bars.
All those New York locks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the New York locks, a lot of them, you didn't enter through that. You entered through a window.
Right.
And I tell people, there were sometimes New York locks on places we would have had, it'd have been quicker just to cut a hole in the side of the house.
Yeah. Because, and just to that point, and I know we're not getting off topic, it's the topic, but it's just a good example of how we were breaching a place that had a metal door one time. We had to switch ramps 3 different times. We were so exhausted, we couldn't get in the door.
Yep.
And it was an apartment
I've been there.
Floor, so there was no other way in.
Yep.
So finally, we were able to breach it, and we actually got some good because the guy was so stupid.
Yeah, we've had that too.
I mean, so to your point, if you could find the ultimate point of entry, then you're always going to take it.
Yeah, we've had that too, and I would at the end of my career, we were successful probably 98% of the time. I would say doing those things, doing flashbang. There's a lot of working parts, and obviously you had to be well trained to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and really out of. Again, I can't put a number to it. We had one shooting, and which is pretty good, and then this guy definitely pointed a gun at somebody and all that. So moving on to knock and announce warrants. A knock and announce warrant is when you approach, and we try to approach stealthy as well. Get up to the location. Obviously, we do as much planning as we can. Get a look from the outside, see which side is the best to approach from. And to get up there quietly, and we approach the door, and it's not necessarily. I mean, it usually is a knock, but sometimes, I always said just grab a beanbag and shoot it from however far we can. It's boom, and then start announcing police so they know that we're coming, and then what they say is offer them a reasonable amount of time. Well, here we're getting into the totally nationwide, the discussion of what is a reasonable amount of time. It's still being discussed.
So I told you, right, that because, obviously we talked a little bit before we came here. Right?
Yeah.
And I guess I should have started, man. It's a huge privilege to be here. They could have.
Oh, sure.
And so, I really think this is such an important topic to discuss because I think there's so many ramifications for us as a city, not just as a police department, but as a city, for not being able to use the tools that are in place for us to be successful in, say, criminal abuse. That is 100% for sure. But, when you talk about, so when you were talking about that, when this all started in 2020, I said, I'm going to get a hold of the person I think will best be able to give me the definition of a knock and announce call. What's reasonable? So I got to hold of the ASAC for DEA, right? That's Assistant Special Agent at Charge. That's the highest person in San Antonio here for the DEA because they fall under the Houston office. And then I got all the U.S. attorneys on this. Both of them agreed that while there's nothing 100% like lockdown written in stone, but both of them agreed that it's a reasonable amount of time for somebody in the rear of the house to move or traverse uninterrupted to the front of the house. So we were talking too, right? So that can mean a lot of different things.
What size is the house?
What size is the house, right? It was a 5,000 square foot house in the Dominion, longer. Maybe it's a 100 block of Porter, not so long, right?
Yeah.
But, the reasonableness of it is always going to have to come in play. And that's always going to fall on the police officers at the scene with their signal out.
And you should be able to articulate that.
Absolutely.
Because I've heard, and different agencies quantify it differently. They like Austin, they believe that they roll up with a parked unit with a loudspeaker, or I think they have one on maybe their armored vehicle, and they will start announcing as they get there. So from the time they offload wherever it is to the point where they get to the door, they consider that in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
Again, until something happens and they start picking that apart there. But what you're saying, I had heard that, but in a time frame, it's generally no less than 10 seconds.
10 seconds, Willie, is an eternity.
And then it's even more so when you're standing in front of the door, getting ready to go into it. And it feels like 5 minutes
of the person inside.
100%.
That's the tricky part, right?
And when we know that.
Yeah. So having worked in narcotics and gangs for so many years, and you in that same element, as a detective, but then I'm running a lot of the warrants for us when you were in SWAT, I can tell you that anytime you're dealing with drug dealers, right? I'm talking about organized criminal drug dealers, right? These are mid to upper level people, even street level, but nonetheless narcotics distributors. who generally are known to have guns, a propensity for violence, and usually have warrants.
The criminal history that we know.
Right. So even if a guy who's never had a criminal history, this means he's slicker than the next guy, right? We can't catch him.
Sure. But see, we think that. The public doesn't think
so. So this is what I'm saying. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's in the best interest of law enforcement ever to do a knock and announce warrant for a dribble. I just don't. It's just, there's been too many times, because when you run a knock and announce warrant on somebody, that it has drugs, not as personal use, right? But as drugs in order to distribute those drugs to the public trafficking. They're trafficking drugs. I don't care if it's 10 keys or guy gets, a couple of grams, a couple of ounces and moves from that, right? But so the destruction of evidence always has to come into play, right? Because you're running in order to be successful. Because if you go in and the guy flushes the warrant, you get nothing. You guys leave. The next day he's back up and running. Here we are, down and round again. But most importantly is the safety of the officers and the safety of the occupants.
But I can tell you, we ran warrants, no knock warrants for grabs. Just a few.
Yeah. So, no,
because they were those.
We have
that detective that needed a number. You know what I mean? And it was flipping a coin, hoping that they had more than what he thought.
Right. So those are trap houses, right? So those are what I call quality of life houses, right? So you get a lot of those. The chief of police gets a lot of these phone calls, right? He kicks them over to safe, and then they troubleshoot the call. So if you and your family live in a house, I and my family live in a house, and we're there, and regardless of where that house is, the house that's across the street from us or over, now is a trap house. It's a drug house. You see traffic coming all day, all night, every time. For the time they get up to after a while, you're like, hey, why aren't the cops doing anything about it? Right? It's a nuisance, right? It's like a quality of life issue, right? Yep. For a while, quality of life was a big thing for the chief of police, remember? It was a big thing. Yeah. It's not anymore.
Yeah.
And so, everybody had to handle these open air drug markets, trap houses, guys selling on the corners, prostitution, vagrant, solicitation. These were all out of his mouth for us to be to make a priority, right? But it's not a priority anymore. So, but when you do it with these trap houses, when you do it with drugs, anytime that you give the occupant notice that we're there and we're coming in to serve a police action, either to take his drugs, take his money, arrest him on warrants, and he has weapons, you always put the police at a disadvantage. I firmly believe that. You always put the police at a disadvantage.
Sure.
And to your earlier point, when you're running a no-knock warrant, it's not willy-nilly. We just get 5 guys in there what they were doing to go up there kicking a door like on TV. First of all, we never kick in doors. We use rams, and we have people that are breaching and people that are covering the windows or people that are covering down. And it's very efficient, right? Super efficient, super fast. It should train.
It should be.
Right. It should.
Yeah. I've seen entries made horribly.
Right.
And not with a ram. I mean, the rope back in the day used to use sledgehammers, and that was, they wouldn't even use them and swing them. They would bump the door.
That's part of the evolution of policing, right? I mean, we were talking earlier about balls warrants, right? And that's just an informal name. Don't Google it because it's not there. But at the end of the day,
a balls warrant means that you took the chance.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
Let it hang, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, and I'll just reiterate that, it was never a proper way of doing anything, because what it does, you erodes the validity of your professional police department is still, right? At the end of the day, you should be seen as a professional police department. And while you are fallible, right? We can all be fallible. But at the end of the day, we're always working not to be. When you start cutting corners like that, it doesn't do anyone any good. Even if you get the drugs and put away the bad guy, what you did is you violated a little bit of that integrity, right? That trust, right?
Yeah.
And so those are the things I'm talking about. But when you talk about warrants, when we talk about warrants, I really do believe that you have to put what you're doing into the proper frame about how it's going to affect, because we haven't had officers shout out knocking announcements. One is we're really not doing it. We're doing knock and talks.
Yeah.
And so knock and talks means
there is and I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Yes. Knock and talks are totally different from knock and announce.
Right.
Because we don't knock and talks all the time.
Right. So you're talking your way in.
Yeah.
Trying to get someone to come to the door. You're saying, hey, I just want to come in. We got information that you like.
And correct me if I'm wrong. You can say this now. I mean, lots of times that yielded some, because these people, you were able to persuade these people that, hey, we're investigating, you were about to, and they would offer up the drugs. Yeah. Like, here you go.
100%.
You want it, and obviously it depends on what you talk to them and all.
And it also depends on the individual inside the house, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they sometimes they don't know that they're like, no, you can't come in here. Or you're just so charming
Yeah.
or you're just able to come in there and just talk it at such a reasonable level that it just makes sense to them. You're not talking down to them. You're not talking up to them.
I will say this, that was before body cameras. Okay. Now with body cameras, you're going to hear the conversation.
Yeah.
Which is all part of the evidence if it ever, it goes to litigation and all that. So the main thing that, we've covered a lot of good information, and I hope people can have an idea of what we're getting at. But we are concerned, and you and I got together, and it was something that weighed on your mind particularly, and it's always weighed on my mind too, as do so many other things that have changed in this alleged new way of policing, reimagining policing. Well, bullshit is what it is. We said already that no-knock warrants are forbidden. So in the true sense, though, not knock and talks, but knock and announce. If you knock and announce, okay, which means we're requiring somebody from inside the location to come and talk to us, and we let them know that we have a warrant signed by a magistrate. So we have a warrant, right? Signed by a magistrate. And we're asking to be civil. Would you let us in? And they deny us warrants, or deny us entry. We still can't make entry, right? In the San Antonio Police Department.
So there's a policy, and it's a word soup. It's so jumbled that you can't figure it out. Right? You have it, I think.
Yes.
And it talks a little bit about it. And one is, I think the first part says, no one will submit a request for a no-knock warrant. Well, when we submit warrant requests, we don't specify.
Let me read that.
Yeah.
So it's in the general manual, search procedure. Members of the San Antonio Police Department are prohibited from applying for or participating in the service of no-knock search warrant entries. When entering private premises, officers shall knock, announce their identity, and demand admittance. They then wait a reasonable amount of time to be admitted and explain their purpose, if so requested. Okay, so they have banned. That is the banning. Like you said, you were on the phone call when they banned the no-knock warrants.
Can I make
sure? Yeah.
Phone call, because I think it's important to note that not everybody in the police department agrees about everything all the time.
Mm.
Right? It's like, it's a workplace, right?
Sure.
That's what it is. But on this phone call, there was everybody on the command staff in 2020. So everybody, the chief of police, 2 assistant chiefs, 5 deputy chiefs, one interim. Every captain that had to do with that area responsible, and every lieutenant that had to that. And then, of course, a couple of the chiefs. Harvey. And so I think there might have been a city attorney on there. And we were talking about this. And there were a lot of people that really kind of placated to whatever McManus wanted. Like, no matter what he said was they were going to do it. That's probably why they were in those positions. They didn't ruffle any feathers. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't try to who it was. But my point on this was that every person to a team, man or woman, every one of them said, because the chief posed the question somewhere like this, I'm paraphrasing, so doesn't matter. He probably won't remember the phone call anyway if you would ask him, but it would probably be like, so this has come up repeatedly, no-knock warrants. I need y'all's opinion on how we should do this. So I'm the deputy chief, interim deputy chief over covert operations. And I am also the captain that's in that role of the covert operations, have been there for a couple of years, right? So it probably affected our area of responsibility, whether our area of responsibility more than anyone else's, but maybe SWAT. Hit every person to a T. Now, some were very emphatic. Oh, absolutely, yes, we shouldn't ban these. And some were like, well, chief, I really believe that this is a great tool for us. Every person on that phone call said, we should retain the ability to use this tool at our city.
But
and he still changed.
Why do you think that was?
Because he did what he always does. He folds.
Who did he fold to?
To the political pressures. He folds every time. He got here in 2006, and every time there's an opportunity for him to stand tall and be a cop and not a politician, he folds.
So the political pressure is obviously not national necessarily. That's where it starts, but within the city, from the city government.
But in a lot of ways, it is national, because it's not only coming from the national arena. It comes down through local congressmen and local city council people who know congressmen, special interest groups that are now calling in.
Oh.
The chief is synonymous for giving his phone number to anybody out there he wants to. The thing about what people don't know, he doesn't know who you are, doesn't care who you are.
Yeah.
The minute you call him, he calls us. Handle this. And so really what he's doing is just giving it to us in order to handle it. But this particular thing was really being pushed by the councilwoman out of two. And then, so an interesting story, and I don't know any of these people. Like, I have no bone to pick with these people, but if you're going to say it, I'm going to hold you to it. So Anna Sandoval, right, who's in District 7. And I remember, because we're watching them, right? We're on these Zooms, 2020 Zoom calls, right? Everybody's like, there's nobody even in the room.
Yeah.
And so, she's on there, and she's on the Public Safety Committee. And the Public Safety Committee is an entity of City Council that listens to the public safety aspect and then goes back and make recommendations to the General Counsel. So it'd be like a subgroup, right? You get the information and you bring this group to us. So it's an important job.
Yeah.
So one day we're on the phone call, not the same phone call we referenced earlier about the internal phone call. This is an external phone. And the chief decides to give a definition on what a no-knock warrant is. And it's, he paraphrased, right? He went wrong. Basically you get an affidavit, search warrant, and you go, and the police don't have to announce. They just use whatever tools they have to do to enter the home as quickly and effectively as they can in order to do X, right? And this lady, this council person, literally said it with her face on this .gov TV. She's like, "Oh my God, Chief, thank you so much for explaining that, because I literally had no idea what a no-knock warrant is."
That's why we are talking about
Public Safety Committee.
Right.
You're on council. So on the, I think I told you, I got on my phone, asked Siri what a no-knock warrant is, and it told me.
Yeah.
She made no effort.
Because a lot of them don't care about it until the issue's in their face.
Just didn't care.
Yeah. Well, we're doing this podcast to talk about the real things that so many other people can't, because we have a lot of law enforcement colleagues that we work with, or some that we haven't, but they're all concerned the same way. But we can talk more. The assistant city manager, Maria Villagomez, is in charge of public safety. She has no clue, yet she's running the show on these things.
She's absolutely right.
She's running the show on these things. She's the puppet master of the chief of police. And as derogatory as that might sound,
it's not.
But it's true. I mean, it's more so in layman's terms. So they ban no-knock warrants, okay, which I brought something up that I looked at as well, because not only and there's always somebody that they refer to and go, well, the expert said also that no-knock warrants are no good. You know what I mean? So they always, a lot of times, if they can find that person, that
a person,
or even an entity that supports their argument, no matter how small of a percentage they make in that argument. Okay. So the NTOA, the National Tactical Officers Association, you're familiar with those people, right? Huge national, mind you. They have also said that no-knock warrants are a thing of the past, and that they're dangerous and they shouldn't be used. And what does it say here? We can all agree that there is no easy answer, but there is a correct answer. No-knock search warrants, though well-intended, no longer pass the test of tactical science, risk mitigation practices, and liability-conscious decision-making.
Okay. So the last part is what matters most to everybody, the liability aspect of it.
Yeah. Always.
But you know how fast that would change? So we're 140 miles from the border. And people don't like to talk about this, but there's a huge influence of Mexican narcotics cartel.
100%. Yeah.
And they're here, and there are people here. They have people that are running it, and soldados and lieutenants, mid-level people, and the gangs here, and they're moving it. And when that will happen, is when someone's at one of these malls and somebody decides to walk up. And when these guys come, they don't come one guy like the gangsters on the east side or the south side. They come 3 or 4 with automatic weapons, and they just mow people down. When that happens, and it's drug related, or people start getting killed, or officers start getting killed, all of those mind shifts will change.
Yep.
Because now they're going to ask, what are we doing about it? Well, you should stay ahead of the curve, right? And I understand that people want to change for the better. Change is always good.
Sure.
But change has to have a reason, right? Like, you have to really understand what you're doing. You just can't blanket everything by doing away with these things, because that's what people think you should do.
But everything they're saying here, that could have been said years ago, back when we were running it anyway. It's all, a lot of this verbiage is fluff at the time to sell what they're trying to sell. Of course, there's risks in everything. There's risk in a patrol officer. We're sitting here, third floor. I'm looking at the highway. I've seen a couple of police cars drive by. Those guys are at risk. If they make a traffic stop, there's risk.
They're more at risk.
They're more at risk because they usually stop the unknown.
Yeah.
But, this situation, well-intended, well-trained. Yes, we do that. That's the whole point. Yes, we know there's risk involved of loss of life, serious bodily injury, no doubt. You and I have had friends dead already, right? We had 3 of our classmates killed within the first year.
Almost 4.
Almost 4 with that. So we still kept going. We still did the job. We still put ourselves in those places. I got shot chasing a car thief. I didn't stop chasing people.
Yeah.
I kept going. And I'm not trying to make this about me, but I knew the risk. I just had to get better at chasing.
You can't have a policing agency that doesn't incorporate and take on risk. I mean, that's just not possible.
No, 100%.
Because what people don't say, and no one wants to say it, that there's 1% of the people out there that just don't respond to anything except police officers, and that are going to come with them in a very decisive way and take them where they need to go. And that's just the only thing they understand. One time we were talking, and I said, man, I was driving when I was on Parker Walk, me and Rocky Rail, we were driving, and we were on the east side, and I saw this little kid, and I pulled up next to him. I said, hey, man, slow down, pull up. And I said, hey, man, how you doing today? It turns out he flicks me off and tells me blah, blah, blah. And I started laughing. At first I was shocked, and I started laughing, and then, Brock tells me, he says, hey, man, I got that. I said, yeah, man, because he doesn't get intimidated by us driving up in a police car with a shiny badge on a blue uniform. He's been around his whole life. Now imagine someone that's been incarcerated or been in gangs or shooting or seen people killed or has no mother, father, any guiding principle, been running dope, carrying guns, carrying out violence since the time they were 13 years old. You think you're going to be able to go up there and politely ask them to do X, Y, or Z? No, you can't. The trick is for us to be able to carry out those duties responsibly and professionally. And that includes no-knock warrants, because those are things that have to be done. Unless you're just telling people that you no longer want to criminalize drugs, right? Because that's just the only way it's going to happen.
And like you say, by prohibiting, and we've talked about, again, not necessarily in this podcast, but you've said before, by prohibiting those things, those are tools, they're valuable tools that you're removing from us that makes our job difficult, which also further increases the dangers to society because we're not getting these people off the street. We've run situations to where, let's say we follow some car burglars. Okay, we see them break into a vehicle. We see that they took something, but let's say we watch them hit 5, and we stop them. In the end, it may be like a cell phone, somebody's checkbook, all this other stuff. We know what the DA is going to do. He's going to drop all but one and probably give him probation on that. So, yeah, we put him in jail. Yeah, we're doing our job again. And the DA's bullshit, Joe Gonzalez, let him go Joe, whatever he is, that's a whole nother podcast in itself. And I've been doing several of them with George Rodriguez on El Conservador all the time. But it takes the individual officers to go, how do we keep these people in jail longer? So in reference to that example, we were waiting for them to get guns. And if we had a lot of the crew, what we call the crew identified, we try to get them on organized crime, not just burglary of a vehicle, which is the Class A misdemeanor, right?
Right.
So why are we doing that on our own, not a directive? It's because we want to protect the public more. The administration doesn't care. If you ask them, they'd say they do. But we're the ones thinking of those things.
So can we segue to this part that we talked about the other day? And that's exactly what happens, because police officers out there, the working police officer understands that they can improvise. That's what we get paid to do, right? Isn't that like a Marine thing?
Yeah.
Improvise, overcome.
Yeah.
Well, police officers do that too, and they understand. So when the chief of this department decided to use policy to basically end around the law and the peace officer's authority under SAPD to execute search warrants, either no-knock or forced entry, what we started doing around here was what we always done. We had such great relationships with other organizations, right? So in Cobra, we had HIDA. HIDA has all these different reach aside. And we would ask those guys to execute our warrants. So when we had the warrant, we couldn't run it, right? Couldn't do a no-knock warrant. And so we would let DEA run it, or we would let the county run it. We would let HSI run it. We would let whoever else could run it because they could run it at the time.
So you said county. County's not a Fed. County, Bear County.
Yeah. So county has a group at the tag, right? It's the Texas anti-gang.
Yeah.
For state-funded gang.
But county can still run no-knock warrants.
And huge credit to them.
Could they be knocking out?
It's huge credit to them because traditionally the sheriff has always kind of been in line with the chief of police, except this was the first major parting of the waves.
Yeah.
And I always thought, and so just to be clear, you got to give respect where it's needed, right? You got to give kudos where it should be. And I give him huge kudos for not following suit. The county still executes no-knock warrants and handles their business. And, and of course, some of it's self-induced, like a politician too, right? Wants to do the trophy shots that's their job. I 100% support that. I've always thought that our job was to make the head of our agency shine. That's our job.
Yeah.
And so take all the credit, do all those things. But I can't believe that nobody in 4 years, because it's almost been 4 years now, has even had enough of an insight to ask the question, like, hey, how come we haven't done any of these big operations? How come there hasn't been any big old, photo shoots with, 57 guns that were seized during the search warrant and 15 kilos?
You see it all in county.
Yeah, but you see nothing. The media here knows it. They love that stuff.
Yeah.
But they just don't care.
No.
It's
something they should talk about.
Things, back in the day with the gang, we were doing big organized gang investigations of major gang groups. And I'm not going to give many names because they don't even deserve to be named.
Mm-hmm.
But they were really big crews here, like very organized prison gang. And we were knocking them out. Not happening.
It's not happening anymore. No. We have lost in San Antonio our intimidation on the public. And again, some people will say, well, that's good.
On the criminal
public. Yeah. And a lot of people nowadays will say that's a good thing. No, it's not. Because we used to be a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. And it wasn't about being mean or, unethical or unlawful or anything like that. Because we've joined the national trend of kinder, gentler, we have also lost the effectiveness of all the police. And I always tell people, from the moment I'd say when I was a patrolman, or you was whatever, when you wore a uniform, I stepped out to the public. I'm using force already. That's my first level of force in my use of force continuum is my presence. And if I have to say, hey, you stop, there's my verbal. Because of what society has allowed, city governments, politicians, from the national side to include our own, we have lost the effectiveness of our presence and our verbal.
So, and there's no more deterrent, right? I mean, the police officers should offer a degree of deterrence, right? Sure, that's our job, right? And
that's why they're having shootings at Fiesta, at downtown.
That never happened before. And it's important to qualify, too. There have always been shootings in the perimeter areas.
Yeah, not in the heart.
So, in other words, even after the New Year's Eve celebration, right? Somebody be walking, start chatting, they've been drinking, back and forth, and someone gets shot and unfortunately killed. And, that happens. But in the heart of it?
Yeah.
Like in it?
Oh, yeah.
Like at Market Square?
Yeah, and we're referencing the shootings that happened this Fiesta. Yeah. I would almost say right in the center of Market Square.
Yeah.
Two thugs. One of them definitely was. I don't really know. They didn't harp on the history of the other guy, but most likely shot each other, shooting at each other in the middle of that. And then an officer had to shoot one of the winner of them within that. So moving on, we've said pretty much the SAPD has banned no-knock warrants, banned them. And they pretty much, when we talk about going up, knocking, announcing that we've told them our intentions, we told them we've got a warrant, they don't, they say, you know what, go screw yourself. Yeah. We are still allowed to by law, forceful entry. We can't do that in San Antonio.
And there goes that policy to circumvent state law.
Right.
And Joe Gonzalez did that too. And I'm not jumping on the whatever you called him, Joe. But I mean, he did the same thing with drugs.
Oh, he needs to be jumped on. That guy's employed.
He has decriminalized. It started out with under a gram, and now it's up to 4 grams of a Schedule 1 drug. Like, really, 4 grams? So one is the state jail felony, right? And the other is the third degree.
Yep.
And now you're taking third degree felonies and you're just wiping them away, you know? And,
Yep.
and it's just like, it's not even diversion anymore. It's just like, we're just dismissing it.
Yeah.
You know? And so those are
Because they think that they're, and again, we're related, we're in an era of feelings. Okay. So this group, because Joe is, now that we know he's being guided by the Ren Collective, a woke group of attorneys out of Boston. We know that. We were talking about it last night. I was just right across the street over here at this meeting, and everybody was talking about that. So what they equate that to is that if they have less than 4 grams, it's a usable amount. So we're not hitting the drug dealers, we're getting the poor drug user.
right.
And that's not right.
Yeah, and so that
Right.
was those things were made at the DA's office because we both have friends that were high up in the DA's office, you know, over the course of our careers. And many of them were great prosecutors. They've lost them. It's a huge disservice to the community because they were good at their jobs. They were trial lawyers. They could get in there and argue the case and get a conviction, right? Not plead them out. I could get in there and argue the case to 12 people. They're gone. And so, but at the district attorney's office, it was largely public opinion. The guy that just recently retired, I think his name is Christensen, he was open about it. Like he said, I just don't think.
No, he's a total activist.
Yeah. So, but he's the first assistant.
Yeah.
And then Joe was the DA. So you had these people now taking their personal inner feelings, like my personal thoughts.
Yes.
And I am now using policy to circumvent the law. Well, then you shouldn't be in that job. And it's no different for the chief of police.
Much of this is unlitigated. It's
So what has he done, Willie? So what has the McManus done using policy to circumvent what we?
he's choked us.
Well, he's done most recently search warrants, can't do entries, right? No knock warrants, can't chase vehicles.
Yeah.
Right. Chasing individuals has been discussed about, like, should we even be chasing individuals? Well, what do you want us to do?
Yeah.
You know,
But I was part of some, and they'll always leave that but, unless. There's always that unless, serious, like you can't let this person go.
Yeah.
Last one I remember was when we were after that medical center rapist.
we'll work that with you.
We were onto him, and, different times in the surveillance, somebody would lose him a little bit and then they'd pick him up, and someone got on the radio and said, hey, we will not lose him. We will, if he runs, we will chase him. I thought that's awesome. I'm like, great. I'm right there with you. I was at a plane vehicle at the time, but it's the same way with chokeholds too. Chokeholds, obviously were banned because of George Floyd. And I don't want to get off on a tangent with chokeholds, but chokeholds, you can't even grab somebody by the neck.
So that's a great example, because I was a part of those discussions, not part of it, but there. And, and I will give him credit, because I do think you got to give credit where it's credit due. McManus really did argue the point that, yes, chokeholds are dangerous, but if an officer is in a position to where he believes his life is in immediate danger of death or serious bodily injury, he can use that. And they were still popping him around.
Yeah.
And ultimately he folded.
Because they're active.
Yeah. And again,
They're activists.
it's like he was trying to make the argument, which is the only time I ever saw him try to make the argument. And then someone got in his ear, one of his aides, and the next thing you know, it went away. But what really, for me, what it boils down to is that the people that ultimately really suffer, they just don't know they're the ones that are losing, are the citizens. Because the police department, I always say, man, we're your San Antonio police, but we work for you. We live here. We are you. Why is City Hall so adverse against us? That never happened.
It doesn't, and I get what you're saying. So the easy answer of why they're doing all this is they're cowards. They don't want to answer the hard questions. Because here's the deal. If today they made an announcement, hey, this has all been bullshit, we are going to implement and authorize our officers to make no-knock entry warrants, no-knock entries on warrants and entries, period. The first jumble of bumble of a warrant, somebody gets hurt, somebody gets killed, and justifiably even, and they're a person of color, and it makes the news, they will cease. And that. They will cease at that moment, and these activists will come out and go, see, we told you so.
Well,
we can't win with those people.
Well, I have actually heard deputy city manager asked the chief of police if the subject that was the fatally wounded was fine.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
And I'm like, look, the first thing I'd really like to hear is the officer okay? And it was the Russian intertwined. And so he was wanted. They went over there, struggled. One of the guns fell out. Guy got shot. Fortunately, the camera.
Yeah.
But now there was a lot of things that could.
Wow.
A lot of things that could be really looked at. And I was the captain there at the time. And so obviously there was a lot of mistakes made. There was a lot of mistakes in terms of gun retention and things like that.
100%.
However, when you take that away, the bottom line is the guy picked up the gun and the camera.
You can see it. And he was ready to shoot. Yep. Finger the trigger.
But, when you start asking questions like that, you can no longer be objective in the way you're thinking.
No.
It doesn't matter the race of someone. It just means, should we have done what we did and are we justified in doing it?
Yeah, but again, these people, and you and I both know, and you're one of the few, and I'm going to say this, not because you're here, but you're one of the few because you understood the job, that you can listen to the officers explain their actions and you can relate to it, going, okay, you're right. But then you were willing to go up and explain that to the people that don't know and say, hey, that's just the way it is. And what was that saying? Yeah, it looks awful, but it was lawful. Yeah. And some things you're just going to have to go with.
And a lot of things really do look awful. But I tell you what they never talk about looking awful is that this year and last year, we've had so many officers shopping. We were there was an officer at that church about 8 or 9 months ago. We just sitting there writing a report. Guy pulls up next door, unloads equipment. Yeah. Remember, I think he was a brand new guy with an FPO or something.
Yeah.
It's like, that's awful. But AI gets a little bit oppressed, but nobody harps on it.
Yeah, but we have too many people that done the unrealistic idea of how those interactions work. There's things that just come out at random. They just come out random. There's so many. I always, as a tactical trainer, I would put on scenarios, and my scenarios, I believe, were realistic. I never heard anything otherwise. And I would tell them, look, you need to use these tactics and to qualify them and verify them, validate them. You need to give them a chance in the real world. Okay. Don't half-ass them, because if you half-ass them, you can't blame it on my tactics that I taught you. Okay. But I always told them that the real situation you're going to run into will not be one of the scenarios that I put you through. Even if I had time to put you through 1 million, it's going to be different.
Well, because one of the things that I think, and I know we're getting towards that time point now, but one of the things that people really never ever take the time to think, and certainly don't want to articulate it, is the police are really the only ones that are playing by the rules.
Yeah, I've always said that.
And those rules are being shifted all the time because of politics, because of policy, because of personal opinion in terms of the
always.
And so the rules are always changing, but the officer's job always remains the same. He still has to go to work. He still has to do his job. He still has to make contact with people that he don't know. And everybody knows who they are because they're wearing a uniform.
Yeah.
I have a daughter in law enforcement. You come from a family of law enforcement people.
Yeah.
We were law enforcement people. I can tell you, I can be objective. I can tell you, I don't think every officer does the right thing on every occasion.
No.
I know. And in my job, I had to initiate disciplinary action. And I would do that if I felt it was necessary.
Sure.
And so, I guess that's the hardest thing to accept. But when we're talking about these things here, I just don't think you can make blanket statements based on some very terrible things or perceived terrible things that happened in a very terrible year that 4 years later are still being affected.
But it had to do with race.
Right.
It had to do with, and I meant to bring it up again, but it was just going to be touched on. I don't think it matters when I bring it up. But everything stems from the Breonna Taylor shooting.
Yeah.
In Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah. Because they tried to dress her up as being totally innocent, having nothing to do with a drug trafficking organization. And there was a lot of underground work to clean her up. They still show pictures, even law enforcement periodicals, pictures of her graduating from some local college EMT. She wasn't an EMT.
Right.
I'm so sick of that. And why the ones that don't agree with it either are still portraying that she wasn't.
Well, I know this is a subject for a whole nother day, but they do that specifically to create a greater divide between the police and the community. They're strategic in what they do, and they execute it flawlessly. It's amazing. It's a work of art to see what the political entities and activists that have done, those with a dog in the fight to create division between police and the community since around 2015, have executed their plan of action flawlessly.
Yeah.
And we have literally watched them do it and asked them for more.
Well, here's the crazy thing. And our viewers that are just learning about a lot of this stuff. I'm sure a lot of our viewers here already kind of know a lot of this going on, but I think it needs to be mentioned that the Breonna Taylor incident did not stem from a no-knock warrant.
No.
They applied for a no-knock warrant, but they decided at the last minute to run a knock and announce.
Right.
So I don't know why this ban on no-knock warrants, period. Because in my professional opinion, and I don't like to pound my chest on anything, but it came to me one day like, wow, so you're considered an expert in the court of law now. Okay, so my professional opinion, had they run an effective, well executed no-knock warrant on them, nobody would have been shot.
So just real quick. So I went to covert operations as a commander, I want to say in 2017. I left there in 2022. Right, so I was there almost 5 years. We ran hundreds of warrants. 2020, things change, right?
Yeah.
And for those of you listening, don't take my word for it. Apply for it. Go down there and ask for an Open Records Act to watch them stonewall you because the lieutenant in narcotics, of course, there was rope and vice too, but he kept flawless records of our search warrants, and there were hundreds of them. And then so if you look at 2017, 2018, 2019, and half of 2020, it's just hundreds of addresses with us taking action. And then you get to August of 2020, and there's nothing. And I guarantee you, I haven't seen it, but since then, it's probably nothing. So we are no longer doing what you're expecting us, the public, to do in order to combat crime. We're just not doing it. And we're not doing it because they forbade us to do it.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, so, yeah, no, I'm glad, I hope we educated a lot of people. I think we both learned some things as well, things that we've had several conversations that we say we should have had someone recording it because there's a lot of good intel that comes out of that. Yeah. It happens with a lot of people that are good at what they did. They were good at their craft and all that. But I appreciate you coming on, and we're going to have to do this again on something else because we got so many other things. But viewers, please, you're welcome to Google search or whatever, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about and validate what we just said. I believe we're experts in our own right in these situations. We believe that them taking away the ability to run entries, period, whether they be no knock or knock and announce, is a valuable tool that they've taken away that is only harming the public. But please continue to listen in, leave some comments. We'd like to hear from you, good or bad, but be professional about it. Don't be just a fool and want to say something stupid because you hate the cops. But thanks for listening.
Yeah.